If someone looked at my life from the outside, they would think I was lucky. I grew up in a luxurious mansion with soaring ceilings, expensive furniture, and family dinners set with silver cutlery. Everything around me exuded wealth: lavish vacations, custom-designed dresses, and extravagant gifts that my friends could only dream of. But there was one thing no one knew: the price I had to pay for this life. My name is Nora Whitmore, daughter of Jonathan Whitmore, owner of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, the largest pharmacy chain on the East Coast of the United States. This company was not only my family's immense source of wealth, but also my father's pride, a man who saw business as his very reason for living. He was not the kind of affectionate father often seen in family movies. When he walked into the house after a long workday, his first words were, never, "How was your day?" but rather, "What were today's sales numbers?" I grew up surrounded by numbers, financial reports, and conversations about profit margins. In my father's eyes, that was how an heir should be raised. He constantly emphasized that the future of the company rested in my hands, and that I needed to be ready to take over one day. My mother, Eleanor Whitmore, was a refined woman who always appeared adorned with dazzling jewelry and flawless dresses without a single wrinkle. If my father set the rules, my mother ensured that everything maintained a perfect appearance. She didn't care about sales figures or business strategies. What mattered to her was the family's reputation. To my mother, being a Whitmore meant upholding the image of an impeccable, high-society family where everything had to be luxurious, from the table settings to how her children behaved in front of others. I had an older brother, Ethan Whitmore, 3 years my senior. If I was my father's prized gem, Ethan was his greatest disappointment. He had no interest in the pharmacy business, no passion for sales or the pharmaceutical market. Instead, he was captivated by history and archaeology, immersing himself in books about ancient civilizations and spending hours researching historical relics. I vividly remember the dinner when I was 14, the night Ethan declared that he would pursue archaeology instead of business. "What did you just say?" My father slammed his fork down, his eyes burning with anger. "I want to study history, Dad," Ethan said, his voice calm but resolute. "History? You plan to dig up ancient rocks instead of running the family company?" My father let out a short, dry laugh. But it wasn't a pleasant one. My mother remained silent, but I could see her stiffen as if moving even slightly would shatter the fragile tension in the air. Ethan said nothing more and simply lowered his head to continue eating. But at that moment, I knew he had been permanently removed from my father's list of choices. From that day forward, my father placed all his expectations on me. I was no longer the second option, I would be the sole heir. As I grew older, I did everything to become the perfect daughter in my father's eyes. I attended meetings, learned how to read financial reports, and started interning at the company when I was just 16. I remember the times my father took me to the office, teaching me how to negotiate with suppliers and evaluate contracts. He would nod in approval whenever I grasped things quickly, but if I made a mistake, his gaze would turn cold, making me feel like I had deeply disappointed him. At some point, I stopped questioning the path I was on. I believed I was born to inherit Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. I believed it was what I wanted. At least, I thought so. Until I met him. Asher Hale. I enrolled at Preston Business School, one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. It wasn't just a place that trained future business leaders, it was a gathering ground for heirs of top corporations. I felt completely at home in this environment, with finance lectures, extravagant networking events, and platinum credit cards swiped without a second thought. But the meeting that changed my life didn't happen at an economics seminar or a lavish cocktail party. It happened in the lecture hall. That day, I was struggling with a market analysis and data systems assignment, a subject I had no interest in. I sat in front of my laptop, frustrated by numbers that refused to cooperate. "Need some help?" I looked up and saw a guy standing in front of me, Asher Hale. I had heard of him before. He wasn't one of the spoiled rich boys I was used to at Preston. Asher was a computer science student, known for his sharp intelligence and genius programming skills. Asher wasn't born into wealth. His family were immigrants. His father was a mechanic and his mother worked as a diner waitress. He didn't have the privileges I had always taken for granted. He was here on a full scholarship, solely because of his talent. I usually hated asking for help, but something about his calm voice made me nod. Asher pulled up a chair beside me, scanning the lines of code I had been struggling with for hours. "You're actually pretty good," he noted, his fingers moving effortlessly over the keyboard. "Your approach is just a bit convoluted. Let me clean it up." 10 minutes later, my assignment was running smoothly. "You're really good." "Thank you. As a token of appreciation, let me buy you a coffee," I said, half joking. Asher smiled, his eyes lighting up. "Looks like today is my lucky day. I love coffee." I never imagined that a programming assignment would mark the beginning of something much bigger. We started spending more time together, at first in study groups, then in coffee shops, where our conversations stretched late into the night. Asher was different from the men I had known. He wasn't from my world, the world of elite dinners, expensive suits, and conversations that revolved solely around stocks and real estate. He was more grounded, more thoughtful, and far simpler. "I never want to be rich just for the sake of showing off," he once told me as we sat together on the grassy lawn of our campus. "I want to create something meaningful, something that can truly change people's lives." I didn't know when it happened, but I began to admire him. Not for his money or status, but for the way he saw the world, a world I had never paid attention to before. And then, I realized I loved him. We had been together for nearly a year when Asher proposed. It wasn't with a giant diamond ring or a grand proposal in an upscale restaurant. He took me for a walk along the cobblestone path near campus, where the streetlights cast a soft golden glow. "Nora," he said, his voice warm and steady, "I know I'm not the person your family wants for you. I know I don't have vast wealth or powerful connections." I squeezed his hand, stopping him before he could say more. "You are everything I want, Asher." He smiled, his brown eyes filled with sincerity. Then, he pulled out a simple silver ring. No sparkling diamonds, no elaborate design. "I can't promise you a luxurious life right now," he said, "but I promise I'll do everything to give us the best life possible. And I promise to always love you." I didn't hesitate. "I do." I thought that if I was happy, my family would accept it. But I was wrong. When I told my parents about the wedding, I saw the shock on their faces, quickly followed by contempt. "Are you joking, Nora?" My mother blinked repeatedly, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. My father narrowed his eyes, his voice cold as ice. "That guy wants our money, doesn't he? Or a piece of the company? Or is he just trying to gold dig you?" I was so heartbroken, I couldn't even speak. My father, the man who had always preached business ethics, now saw Asher as nothing more than an opportunist. Just because he wasn't wealthy. That was when I realized, to them, love didn't matter, only money and status did. And I knew this was just the beginning of the most important battle of my life. I knew my parents wouldn't accept Asher easily, but I never expected the dinner introduction to turn into an absolute nightmare. My mother was the one who suggested the dinner. "We need to meet him before making any decisions, Nora," she said, her voice sweet, but carrying something hidden beneath. My father said nothing, but his expression made it clear that he saw this as a personal insult. In his world, people like Asher were not accepted. Or rather, they had no place in the Whitmore family. I had convinced Asher that this was an opportunity for my family to get to know him better, but deep down, I had a bad feeling about it. That evening, Asher and I walked into the grand dining room of the Whitmore estate, where family dinners were always formal, complete with expensive wine glasses and glittering chandeliers. But instead of a warm welcome, we were met with scrutinizing glances and forced smiles. "Good evening, it's a pleasure to meet you all," Asher said, his voice calm, though I could feel the tension in every word he spoke. My mother set down her wineglass, her gaze sweeping over Asher's simple suit before she raised an eyebrow. My father didn't bother hiding his displeasure. He merely nodded slightly, not even offering a proper greeting. No one invited him to sit, as if they were testing his patience. The heavy silence lingered until we finally sat down at the table. Dinner began, but no one was truly focused on the food. Every gaze was fixed on Asher, as if he were an item being appraised. "Asher, what do you do for a living?" my father asked, his voice calm yet laced with scrutiny. "I'm a software engineer," Asher replied, maintaining his composure. "I'm developing an AI platform to help businesses manage data more efficiently." My father smirked. "AI, huh? One of those trendy new tech fads? Interesting. And how much do you make from this little project of yours?" I clenched my hands under the table. I knew this wasn't a casual question. In my father's world, a man's worth was measured by the balance in his bank account. Asher didn't waver. "I have some investors interested, but more importantly, I believe in the long-term potential of this product." My father let out a short, derisive laugh. "Sounds familiar. Do you have any idea how many young men just like you talk about long-term vision and end up living in a cramped apartment, eating instant noodles?" I set my knife down on my plate with a sharp clang, breaking the tense silence. "Father, Asher is not some naive dreamer," I said, my voice tight with frustration. My mother blinked and delicately placed her napkin on the table, as if preparing to deliver a lesson in reason. "Nora, you have to understand, you grew up in an environment where money was never a concern. We have a certain standard of living, and we only want you to maintain it." I let out a dry chuckle. "You mean I should marry someone rich?" My mother didn't deny it. The tension in the room thickened. But the breaking point came with my father's next words. "Let's be honest, Nora," he said, setting his utensils down and looking straight at Asher. "He's just using you for an opportunity to get his hands on your money. Don't think I don't see it. Men like him always have the same story. Poor, hard-working, ambitious, but in the end, all they really want is a shortcut to wealth." I heard a quiet, saddened sigh from Asher, but he didn't react immediately. He simply met my father's gaze, unwavering. "You can believe whatever you want," Asher said, his voice calm but sharp. "But I have never and will never rely on someone else's money to succeed." My father tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into a dismissive smile. "Oh? Is that so? Do you really think you can give my daughter the life she deserves?" I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough!" I shouted, standing up abruptly. The room fell silent. "You taught me about the value of hard work, about building success with your own hands," I said, staring at my father, my eyes burning with anger. "And now, here you are, belittling a man who is doing exactly that, just because he wasn't born into wealth?" My father stood up as well, his gaze filled with fury. "If you walk out of here with him, don't bother coming back, Nora." I felt my entire body tremble. I took a deep breath, then turned to Asher, gripping his hand tightly. "I guess that means I'm no longer your daughter?" And with the heat of emotions surging inside me, I walked out of that house. Out of my family. As I reached the door, I paused for a moment, waiting. Hoping for some last words from my parents. Something, anything, that might indicate they would reconsider. But no one even looked at me. I made my choice. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I didn't know what it truly meant to be cut off from family, until it actually happened. That day, when the doors of the Whitmore estate slammed shut behind me, I thought it was just a wooden door, a lifeless object. But in reality, it was the final barrier between me and the world I had once belonged to. No more luxurious dinners at the grand dining table. No more harsh critiques softened by parental protection. No more extravagant vacations or expensive cars, where I never had to worry about the cost. I didn't just lose my family. I lost the security of the life I had known for 23 years. But I had no regrets. Asher and I left without a concrete plan. He took me to his small apartment, a modest but warm place. There were no crystal chandeliers, no plush velvet chairs, but there was love and peace. The first days were not easy. I was used to having everything at my fingertips, but now, I had to learn how to live like an ordinary person. My credit cards were canceled the very next day, my personal bank accounts frozen. I was left with exactly $5,000 in a savings account I had opened in high school. A sum of money I had never thought I would actually need. But Asher didn't let me dwell on negativity for too long. "We're going to be okay, Nora," he said, squeezing my hand. "We don't need anything but ourselves to build this life." He believed it. And slowly, I did too. Asher worked relentlessly. He had told my father he was developing an AI platform, but my father didn't believe him. He thought it was nothing more than a foolish dream. But I knew, Asher had a clear vision. During the day, he worked as a programmer for a mid-size software company. At night, he buried himself in his computer screen, writing line after line of code to build the platform he believed would revolutionize data management for businesses. We ate more instant noodles than I could count, but each day, I saw the fire in Asher's eyes burn brighter. "I don't need anyone's validation," he told me one night as we sat on our tiny balcony, looking out over the city. "I just need to believe in this myself." And I believed too. I was no longer a Whitmore heiress, but I still had a business mind. I realized that the skills I had learned while working at Whitmore Pharmaceuticals were not useless. I could read financial reports faster than anyone, analyze markets, and build business strategies. I started taking on small consulting jobs for startups. I had no reputation, but I had knowledge and sharp instincts. Gradually, I built a name for myself. One company referred me to another, then another. I no longer worried about rent, and soon, I was able to save. 1 year after leaving my family, I officially launched my own business consulting firm. No backing from my parents, not a single dollar from the Whitmore empire. Just me, with my own abilities. There was one person who didn't turn his back on me. A year after I left home, I received an email from Ethan. "Nora, are you okay? I heard what happened from a distance. Mom and Dad don't mention you, but I know you well enough to understand that you would never walk away unless you truly believed in your decision. If you need anything, just say the word. I support you." I couldn't stop my tears from falling. Ethan had never been the son our parents loved. They saw him as a failure. But he was the only one who had ever truly understood me. "I'm okay, Ethan," I texted back. "Thank you." We stayed in touch. He was the one family member who believed in me. 3 years after I walked away with nothing, I stood in front of the towering headquarters of Hailtech, the tech company Asher had built. It was no longer just an idea, it was an empire. Asher had turned his AI platform into a groundbreaking product. Hailtech now had hundreds of employees, major contracts with top corporations, and a loyal customer base. And I was no longer a girl living in my father's shadow. My consulting firm had become a well-respected name in the industry. I helped startups find their path, helped them grow, just as I had done for myself. We did it. Without my family, without their money. Just us. And I had never believed I could. 3 years after I walked away with nothing, I was no longer the weak Nora Whitmore, living under my family's control. Asher and I had built everything from nothing. Hailtech, Asher's company, had become one of the leading names in AI for businesses. Major corporations scrambled to sign contracts, and the media praised him as the genius mind behind the data revolution. His personal net worth surpassed $500 million just 2 years after the company was valued on the market. That was Hailtech. As for me, I was no longer the girl living in my father's shadow. Whitmore Consulting had grown into a top-tier consulting firm for startups, helping them optimize their growth strategies. I had my own team, working with clients ranging from small startups to large companies looking to restructure. We had done it, without a single dollar from my family. And then, the day came when I would have to face them again. I hadn't heard a word from my parents in 3 years. Ethan messaged me from time to time, saying that our parents never mentioned me, as if I had never existed. But then, an unexpected invitation arrived. The Whitmore family cordially invites Ms. Nora Whitmore and Mr. Asher Hale to the 60th birthday celebration of Mr. Jonathan Whitmore. I laughed as I looked at the glossy cream-colored invitation. My father, the man who disowned me, was now inviting me to his birthday party? Asher sat beside me, quietly observing. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I turned the invitation over in my hands, running my fingers over the gold-embossed lettering. "We're going," I said, smiling. "I want to see what they really need to see in us." The Whitmore estate no longer shone as brightly as the day I left. The once meticulously maintained gardens now showed signs of neglect. I realized that things were no longer the same. The party was much smaller than the extravagant events I had once attended. As we stepped inside, all eyes immediately turned to Asher. "Oh my God, that's Asher Hale," someone whispered. "The CEO of Hale Tech. I just read his interview in Forbes." The same people who once looked down on Asher were now scrambling to speak with him. They no longer saw him as an outsider, but as a gateway to wealth and opportunity. And then, I saw my parents. My mother approached me with the same forced smile I had once known so well. "Nora, darling, you're finally home," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, waiting to see what she would say next. My father, the man who had thrown me out 3 years ago, now walked toward me, attempting to appear friendly. "My daughter, you've changed so much," he said. "I'm very proud of what you've accomplished." I let out a soft laugh. "Oh really? You're proud of a daughter you disowned?" The air around the table went still. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain the authoritative presence he once commanded. "There's no need to dwell on the past, Nora. Family is family. And, actually, your mother and I have something we need to discuss with you and Asher." I glanced at Asher before following them into a private sitting room. As soon as we sat down, my father wasted no time. "Today is my birthday. I wanted to see you after all this time, and I want to apologize. I hope you can forgive me," he said. "That aside, now that you're successful, our family is facing some financial difficulties, and we were hoping you could help." I wasn't surprised. As it turned out, after I left, my father had handed over the management of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals to a distant relative, Lucas Whitmore. Lucas had made disastrous financial decisions, leading to multiple lawsuits and a loss of customer trust. Now, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. "The banks have refused to extend our loans," my father said, his voice strained as he tried to remain composed. "Without a new investment, Whitmore Pharmaceuticals will collapse." My mother chimed in, her tone saccharine to the point of nausea. "Nora, we may have had our differences, but you're still a part of the Whitmore family. And Asher, you're a smart businessman. If you invest in the family company, it can rise again." I glanced at Asher, who remained silent, observing. I knew he was always willing to help those in need, but this wasn't one of those times. I crossed my legs, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. "So, what you really want is for Asher to pour money into the company?" My mother forced a tight smile. "It's not just about money. It's about family helping each other." I looked directly at my parents, unwavering. "Family? You're right, family should help each other. But 3 years ago, you made it very clear that I was no longer part of the Whitmore family." My father's face paled while my mother struggled to maintain her smile. "Nora, don't be like this." I stood up, pulling Asher up with me. "No, Mother. I've learned my lesson. Blood doesn't make a family." I turned and walked toward the door, not looking back once. And this time, I knew I would never return. I walked out of my father's birthday party without looking back. This time, I was certain I would never go back again. My parents had always believed I would forever need them, that I couldn't survive without the Whitmore family. But the truth was, I had built a life far greater than they ever imagined, a life free from the weight of legacy and inherited wealth. And while I rose, they fell. Just 6 months after that birthday party, Whitmore Pharmaceuticals officially declared bankruptcy. I didn't find out through a message from my parents, they never contacted me again after that night, but through financial news headlines. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals faces massive lawsuit, assets frozen. Once a pharmaceutical giant, the company files for bankruptcy. The Whitmore family, forced to sell estate, moves into modest apartment after financial collapse. Headline after headline, but I felt no satisfaction. I had warned them, but they never listened. Lucas Whitmore, the distant relative my father had trusted to run the company, had signed multiple deals with low-quality suppliers, leading to a flood of lawsuits from customers. By the time the government launched an investigation, it was too late. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals collapsed in the exact way my father used to mock other failing companies. And in the end, my parents were left with nothing. The Whitmore estate, the home I once thought I would live in forever, was auctioned off to pay debts. The luxury cars, the priceless art collection, even the jewelry my mother once flaunted at high society events, all disappeared, one by one. They moved into a small apartment in a far less glamorous neighborhood, surviving on what little savings remained after clearing their debts. Once at the top, they had become forgotten names in the business world. Ethan was the only one who kept in touch with me. He never expressed satisfaction over our parents' downfall. If anything, he just sighed when talking about them. "I thought they would reach out to you," he said during one call. "They won't," I replied with a small smile. "They'll never admit they were wrong." And just as I expected, my parents never called, never apologized, never acknowledged the pain they had caused me. They had once valued reputation above all else, and now they would rather endure hardship than admit that their daughter had succeeded without them. Perhaps, in their hearts, I was still the traitor who abandoned the family. But I didn't care anymore. One evening, I sat on the rooftop of the Hailtech building, looking down at the city, glowing with lights. Asher stepped outside, taking a seat beside me, handing me a glass of wine. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air wash over me. "I'm thinking if someone had told me 3 years ago that we'd be here, I wouldn't have believed them." Asher smiled, his eyes filled with love as he looked at me. "But you did it." I looked at him. The man who had stood by my side, even when we lived in a tiny apartment, even when we had days where all we could afford was instant noodles. He never turned his back on me, even when my family did. And I knew, in that moment, that I was the richest person in the world. Not because of money, though Asher and I now had more than we ever dreamed of. Not because of fame, though our names had appeared on the front pages of top business magazines. But because I had a husband who loved me unconditionally, a brother who always supported me, and a life I had built with my own hands, free from my parents' control. One day, I received a message from an unknown number. "Nora, your father is sick. He won't say it, but I know he wants to see you." I read the message in silence. 3 years ago I might have rushed back, hoping for an apology, for some belated acceptance. But I was different now. I was no longer the weak girl who craved my family's approval. I had built a life of my own, one I was proud of. And yet, my heart wasn't entirely cold. I turned to Asher, the man who had been by my side through the hardest of times. "What do you think?" I asked softly. Asher gently squeezed my hand. "I'll support whatever decision you make, Nora. But I know there's something still lingering in your heart." I sighed. Some doors could be closed, but not all of them had to be locked, forever. I decided to see them. When I stepped into the small apartment where my parents now lived, an unfamiliar feeling washed over me. The people who once lived in luxury, who once valued reputation above family, now sat before me with a humility I had never seen in them before. My father looked at me, and the pride and authority that had once been in his eyes were gone. Only regret remained. "Nora?" His voice was weak, but it was enough to bring back old memories. I didn't know what to say. The wounds were still there. But as I looked at the frail man in front of me, I no longer felt anger. I felt acceptance. "How are you feeling, Dad?" I asked, my voice not as cold as I once imagined it would be. He stared at me for a long moment, then gave a small smile. A real one, not one of arrogance or pretense. I made mistakes, he said, his voice rough and weary. I know I can't change the past. But I just want you to know. I'm proud of you. I couldn't stop my tears from falling. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the closest thing my father could offer from the depths of his heart. My mother reached for my hand, and for the first time, she was no longer the poised, high society woman she once was. I'm sorry, Nora, she whispered. I let money and status blind me. I only hope you can forgive me. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a silent response. I knew things would never go back to the way they were, but maybe in some way we could start over. Not perfectly, but in our own way. The story of Nora Whitmore is not just about breaking free from family control. It is a lesson on the true meaning of success and happiness. In society, many people are bound by family expectations, by the weight of reputation and inherited wealth. But the truth is, success only matters when you build it yourself. Nora lost her old family, but she found her real one. Those who loved her unconditionally. Her story is a reminder that our worth is not determined by where we come from, but by what we create with our own hands. What do you think about Nora Whitmore's story? Do you agree with her choices? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about life, family, and valuable lessons.